Good morning, everybody. Didn't expect the response. That was pretty cool. This has been an almost 2-year journey for me to be standing here, so it's almost emotional to be here. I get the pleasure of introducing some concepts to you that I hope you'll take away and get value from for many years to come. Thoughtworks has a really strong heritage of contributing to the community, so it makes me really proud to be here doing this. The first thing I want to introduce is the concept of fluency. Thinking about the background of digital, framing digital. The unbelievable explosion of technology has caused something that will never go backwards. First of all, customer expectations have heightened in a way that we've never seen before. They want real time, anytime. They want a consistent experience. They want to be in total control. But the killer punch there is it's constantly changing. So you can't stand still as an organisation. You've got to be ready to move whenever the customer's expectation moves. The second thing is speed. We're seeing speed like we've never seen before, but speed has multiple impacts. So the first thing is the speed in which you need to make decisions has changed. Secondly, the speed in which you need to get things into the market has changed. And thirdly, the speed of change has changed. And so you can't stand still and you can't kid yourself that you know what's going to happen in 6 months. You can't plan for a year. You can't plan for 3 years. Lastly, the challenge of adopting new and emerging technology that enables you to take opportunity in the marketplace. So these are the things that I talk about when I say, what is digital? It's this unbelievable explosion of technology that has created a wealth of opportunity for those who are capable of taking it. So the first thing we thought about is, what are the characteristics of organisations that are doing this really, really well? There are 7. You know they're not, but there are 7 that we have. So the first one, understanding what value means to customers. So not what you get, what they get. I met with a CIO of a bank once, and we were talking around things that they needed to do to create change. And he was bragging to me about the enormous amount of research they've done to identify that 70% of their customers want a mortgage. Pause for dramatic effect. So of course I said, I don't know anyone who wants a mortgage. The epiphany, 70% of customers want a home. Second pause for dramatic, it hits you, doesn't it? As soon as you say it, oh yeah, 70% of customers want a home. Why is that important? Actually, it's important because of what happens afterwards. If you want people to have a mortgage, leaders will say, sell more mortgages. We'll then do something like a digital mortgage advisor. Got to do something digital. Or we'll do some product bundling, and then we'll get some agile teams together and we'll build some features and it'll be awesome. Go down the other path. Imagine if leaders said, put people into a home. Same dramatic effect, isn't it? It's nice, feels good. Put people into a home. The people you would put together to make that happen would be very different than the first ones. The skills you would need would be very different. What you would measure as success would be completely different. And the way your employees would behave and think about your organisation would be very, very different. Second, align everything to that. Everything. So if you think about your organisational structures, your HR policies, the legal and regulatory policies and guidelines, if you think about funding models, if you could optimise everything to maximise the delivery of value to your customers by volume and by frequency, that's what makes it successful. So let me think about that in a really basic way. Cascades, love cascades. Imagine if you were leaders who had a sole responsibility to determine the outcomes of your organisation. That's what I would expect of you. And so you take that outcome and you assign a single measure to it. Just one. That tells teams from then on how to make a decision. How do they know if we're achieving the outcome or progressing towards the outcome? And then imagine if you put a group of people together who had all the knowledge required to deliver you that outcome, and they design work to move the measure. It's almost cheating. And then you do it again. They design the work and they add a measure to it. And then the next group of people come along and they design work to move that measure. You notice we're starting with the measure, designing the work. We're not creating work and then adding a measure to it, right? So imagine that cascade. And we keep cascading until a single team has autonomy to deliver a piece of that outcome. Why is that important in alignment? Look back up again. What do you see? Well, the piece of work is a small piece of the outcome of the organisation, total alignment. And the measure is a leading indicator of the original measure, total alignment. Next thing you know, everybody's working towards the same thing. The next trait, the ability to change. You must have the ability to change. What I call, it's not a real word, stoppability. So stoppability is the ability to pause and go, should we keep going? The ability to pause and say, are we actually achieving the outcome we set out to achieve? So the only way you can have stoppability is if you start working in small chunks. Reduce the size of your workloads. Make smaller decisions. Commit smaller amounts of money at a time. Smaller amount of time at a time. I'm not sure if that works, but you know what I'm saying. And most importantly, build an architecture capable of frequent change. The next one, a test and learn culture. I'm going to explain what I mean by that because I think people say different things when they think of test and learn cultures. I believe the most important trait of a leader is introspectiveness. Introspectiveness is the thing that allows you to stand up and say, I don't know. Why is that important? Well, when we talk about test and learn culture, what we're saying is, if you are 100% certain, you have absolute knowledge that the thing you are going to do will deliver the outcome, give them the money, let them do it. Go for it. Why would you even ask them to business case that if you know it's going to happen? Opposite end of the scale, if you don't know and you just have a good idea, that's great. So commit a small amount of money, a small amount of people, and time box it and let them go and find out. So why would you business case it? Because they don't know. Why are we business casing? Oh. Anyway, in between is really difficult. What's in between is a new talent that companies need to learn. It's the ability to scale an idea that worked. So when we're working with no idea and we're experimenting to get knowledge, we're using hypothesis testing. When it works, we then have to test whether it can work again at scale. You can't go from hypothesis worked to let's do it all. You've got to look in the middle. Do you have the capability to do this at scale? Is it profitable? I was working with a CEO of a very, very, very large telco in Australia, and they had just done a piece of work out in one of the suburbs to test out whether or not they could actually stay alive. And what I mean by that is that they had a 70% market share in fixed line, and as they were rolling out the NBN, the market share was 30%. That's life-changing. So they ran an experiment in a suburb where they just sent all the technicians in and served customers to the absolute maximum, to the point where they cried. There are videos of customers crying about how well they were served. The market share in that area was 80%. And the CEO rightfully said, can we afford to serve customers that well? Of course, the reply is, can you afford not to? Next is the strategic use of information assets. This is the huge data play. Data has had such a significant impact on the way companies are functioning right now. It helps us make decisions. Think of what I just talked about in the test and learn culture. It helps us make decisions. Use data to make decisions. I worked with a very, very large client over here who I can't mention, but one of the most amazing things that happened to me while I was there is that they handed me a book of customer knowledge, literally, physically, an A4 book, and asked me to take it back to the hotel, but I had to return it the next day. It was a goldmine. They could describe their customers so brilliantly. And I took the book back the next day and I said, who's read this? Only the executive. They had the most amazing customer knowledge, but used none of it in their decision making. Data has become critical. Second thing about data is it allows us to add value in ways that we've never imagined before. So we can now create value-added product through the use of data that we have. So new product, new opportunity, new insight, and a far greater understanding of customer. The next one, my favourite, structures and governance. Get rid of them, just get rid of them. You cannot operate at this pace when you overstructure and overgovern. We must create lightweight governance structures. And the way you do that, you use data. You use test and learn cultures. You create a visibility and a transparency inside your organisation that makes decisions obvious. For me, I love to use great rooms, Obeya rooms, right? It's Japanese. Most things are that come out of this space, right? So Obeya room's great room where you visualise the entire organisation from strategy through to the work being done. I promise you it's not aligned. I worked with a client just recently where the work that we put on the wall we attached tenure to. And around about 65% of all work they were doing outlived 3 strategy changes. 3. Which meant that they were changing the words, but they weren't changing what they were doing. Interestingly, we also put a big poster up on the wall, didn't go down great, where we basically showed the official market share of that organisation for the last 14 years and the amount of money they'd spent over that last 14 years in trying to improve it. It was flat. The market share line was flat because they weren't changing anything. So we must make really lightweight governance structures that allow decisions to be made often, decisions to be made closest to the work, right? So we're empowering the people closest to work to make the right decisions, which comes from alignment. Because when everyone knows what it is that they need to be doing and why they're doing it, the decisions become easy. And if you use visibility and transparency, decisions become obvious. And then lastly, there is just a minimum set of technology understanding that every business executive needs to now have. You can't function a company without knowing about tech. You just can't. And so we must start to take the language of technology into the boardroom. We've got to take the language of technology into the business. We have to take away the line between IT and the business. They cannot be separate. They can't be separate companies. This is one thing. Famous story of an organisation where they had a new CEO come in. He put all the board in the room, all the executives in the room, and he said, right, what are the 10 most important things our customers want from us right now? And he got up and walked out. He came back later and they had these 10. He said, right, what are the 3 most important things on that list? And he walked out. You get the hint, came back. We got down to the 1 most important thing. Next question, who are the people in the organisation who can deliver us that one thing? And a whole bunch of names were nominated. We went and got those people in a room and said, right, what can you do in the next 4 weeks? And they put forward what they could do. And he said, well, give me at least that. And if anything gets in your way, you call me directly. And then, of course, he turned to the executive and said, right, what was number 2? Right? So just really thinking about how we start to get this conversation and make sure that everyone is just focused on delivering on the outcomes of the organisation. So what do we do next? We understood that there's these common 7 characteristics. So the next thing we asked ourselves is, how does an organisation adopt those characteristics? How do you take that on? And we come up with a range of capabilities. There was a lot of them. So we bucketed them, as you do, and we called them building blocks. So we believe these are the building blocks that you need to build capability in to become a modern digital business. But what became really unique, the epiphany moment was, not everybody needs the same amount of capability in every one of them. Not everybody needs to be Netflix. So this uniqueness, this unique digital footprint that exists, where you say everybody needs all 5, you just don't need them in the same depth. How do you go about thinking about how much you need? That's a really good question. So we thought about that too. And what we came up with is a digital fluency model. For those who are familiar with the Agile Fluency model, you'll see it looks very unique. That's deliberate. We actually spoke to the creators of the Agile Fluency model as we were building it. The Agile Fluency model is designed to help teams work out how to adopt Agile practices into their team to maximise their team. This is about organisations. How do you adopt digital capabilities to maximise what you're trying to achieve as an organisation? Why fluency? So the concept of fluency is really important. First of all, it's not step by step. You don't have to go from focusing through to executing, through to optimising, through to strengthening. Second of all, it's aspirational. It's not about where you are. It's about where you want to be. So you choose your aspiration. You choose how far you're prepared to go in building those capabilities. This is really critical because today the market is just swept with people out there doing surveys, paying a consultancy firm to fill in their own surveys to determine where they're currently at, to compare it against a competitor, just to find out what it would take to catch up. So aspiration is far more important. So then what we thought we'd do was, wouldn't it be cool if you could take the concept of digital fluency and apply it to the building blocks and end up with a multi-dimensional pattern? Something kind of like this. So, digital fluency model applied to the building blocks creates your digital fluency pattern. So this is your unique digital footprint. This is your signature. This is your aspiration for digital. Sitting behind every one of these bullet points, every one of these markers, is sensible default investments that you should make in order to attain that level of fluency in that building block. And when you add them all up together, you end up with a backlog of the investments you should make in order to become a modern digital business. So if I looked under focusing for platform strategy, it might look something like this: a list of digital investments. What Thoughtworks will do on top of that is that we'll take that backlog of work and we'll use our knowledge of you as an organisation and the industry that you're in to personalise the backlog of investments, to prioritise that backlog of investments with you, and to turn it into a digital transformation roadmap that will be founded in fluency. It won't be what everyone else says you should do. Imagine this for a second. Imagine you have a cloud group inside your organisation. Imagine that. How many vendors are knocking on their door every week, talking to them about the next big thing that they should be investing in, pushing their wares? And of course, you've created this unique cloud group. So what are they measured on? What do they think is success for them? Having the most awesome cloud environment in the world. What if your fluency pattern told you what you had was good enough? That's what this is about. Understanding what's important for you and knowing what it is you should invest in. So, the next obvious question then becomes, right, I have my fluency pattern. How do I do it? What's next? This is a big moment for me right now. It's like a curtain's about to rise up, right? In my head, there's a drum roll going on, so just go with me for a second. So I've spent the last 18 months having the pleasure of working with Gao Zhao, our CEO, and Mike Mason, one of our heads of technology, answering this question of how do we create something really authentic that is directed at leaders to say, what does it take to actually transform the organisation? What do I really have to face into? Not the good stuff. There's a lot of really nice, pretty words out there about digital transformation. What does it actually mean? What are the sorts of decisions I'm going to have to face into? There are 3 sections in here. Section 1 says, how do I simplify my business model so that I can understand what value truly means to my customer and align my organisation to maximising that value delivery? Section 2 says, what's going to stop me? What are the things I'm going to have to do? What am I going to have to consider? How does functional constraints, HR policy, legal policy, funding models, how do the functional constraints get in the way? More importantly, how do the organisational constraints get in the way? Organisational constraints are the things that game the system. You know how it works, right? So like you get to the end of a financial year and you need to make your number. Things are getting tight, we're under pressure, so we slow all the work down to land exactly where we needed to land to make that number. Because as an executive team once told me, we can't possibly underspend. That's a high-risk strategy. Go figure. So we understand all the constraints. These are the cultural and gaming constraints that exist in an organisation. We expose those. The third section talks about that minimum set of technology understanding that you need to have as a business executive. And it's written in a way where you can just read chapter 10, summarises everything, and then you can deep dive in the following chapters on the things that are just of interest to you. And then lastly, there's a personal section on leadership traits. What is it that you now have to do that's different in this age from what you maybe have done as a leader before? You need to be really strong at building communities. You need to be able to return problems back unsolved so that you teach people how to solve problems for themselves. You need to no longer be the oracle. You cannot be the holder of knowledge. You need to recognise that knowledge needs to exist close to the work. And the only way you can do that is to set clear outcomes in customer terms with a single measure and allow the talents of your people to come to bear to make that a reality. At the end of each chapter, we put a couple of suggested steps that you could take to get going. They turned into these 34 tenets. That's what they're all about. So I hope you get a lot of value out of it. The book is actually released digitally next week. Around about 3 weeks later, it'll be available in physical copy, and I promise you, each and every one of you will get a copy of that as soon as it's available sent to you. Thank you very much for listening, sharing this journey with me. As I said, it's slightly emotional because this has been a long, hard couple of years to get it all together. I hope I get to spend a lot of time with you all over the next day and a half talking about these. I'd really love to get your feedback on it and see what you think. Thank you very much.